Hello and welcome to the People's Food Summit. And today I'm really pleased to have a person I call a friend, and we've actually known each other for many, many years and been working on the same platforms. Allan Savory has been working for more than 70 years on regenerating brittle landscapes. And these landscapes are around two-thirds of our planet. And Allan has probably had more influence on regenerating these areas than any single person that I know of, and probably any single person in the history of the planet. We're talking about um, at least 55 million acres directly through his Savory networks. But there's been lots of other, I'll call copycats, who have taken his ideas and given it a whole range of other names, such as mob grazing, cell grazing, um, and using his ideas for millions of more acres. So, from my point of view, what he's achieved is astounding. But I think also for me, what's been really astounding is the fact that he's done it while being attacked by academics and the mainstream as being a heretic. And heretics have been the people who have always done, or scientific heretics, the most profound changes. An example is Copernicus, was who proposed that the Earth went around the sun instead of the whole universe circling the Earth. He was sort of ignored. 100 years later, Galileo then brings it up again, but has to recant because they threatened to burn him at the stake as a heretic over it. The I think that one of the ones most people don't know about is after the Wright brothers did the first powered flight, it took more than 2 years for it to really get into the mainstream, into the media, because the academics at the time had proven mathematically that heavier than air flight was impossible. So therefore, the Wright brothers must be lying. They can't be true. And it's this same prevailing dogma of academics, of mainstream, that has been fighting Allan, despite the fact that thousands and thousands of landowners, ranchers, farmers have been adopting his methods. And where they're doing it correctly, the results have been astounding. So, Allan, I'll hand it over to you now, and as the heretic, and you can talk about it.
All right. Well, thank you, Andre. That's a good place to start. Yes, there are two types of discovery. It's taken me 70 years to understand the resistance to just common sense and science. So what I have realized is there are two types of discovery. There are discoveries that are new, and everybody knows it's a new discovery. Institutions know it's a new discovery. Citizens know it's a new discovery. And you get controversy. You use the scientific method to test, etc. And the idea is rejected or it is adopted within a decade or so. And we move on to Nobel Prizes and the world moves on. Now, periodically, and you brought up two instances, that very seldom in the history of the world, there's been another type of discovery. And I'm guilty of two of those. So that's why it's not because people are bad or evil. Most people are good. That is why there's been the resistance to me. Now, the same fate happened to Semmelweis, Ignaz Semmelweis. He effectively discovered bacteria when the surgeons and doctors and medical world didn't believe that this happened. He just washed his hands after cutting up corpses before going to the maternity wards and saved thousands of women's lives. Now, he was so persecuted that he actually died in a mental asylum. Now, in my case, I thank God I was already insane 70 years ago, and that has saved me because I have suffered a far worse fate than he did. All right, so what is this type of discovery? What it is somebody in the world will discover something that is truly new, but ordinary citizens can see that, and thousands of farmers and ranchers and pastoralists have seen what I'm saying, right? And individuals within institutions. But the discovery goes against the beliefs of society at large, and institutions are not human. They do not behave like a human being. They defend the beliefs of society for up to 200 years or more until society's beliefs change with these type of discoveries, because the institutions know for certain that this is not a new discovery. This is wrong, right? So that's why the resistance to my work and all the plagiarization and mimicry and everything, while knowledge gradually spreads and eventually change will occur another 100 years from now, unless we can find another way to short circuit that process. So the two heresies are that for thousands of years, we, all humans, believed that if land is being damaged and animals are involved, there are too many animals. And you can go back in ancient scripts and see them blaming the nomads and their sheep for the overgrazing causing the deserts, when the desert sands were overwhelming cities in the biblical world. And that belief became scientific validity and is reinforced in thousands of PhD dissertations, etc. Now, what I discovered, I held that belief. I was trained in that, and I believed it. And to short circuit, I won't talk about all the work I was developing with fellow scientists, with wildlife managers. We were trying to develop game ranching, or rewilding, as the English are calling it now. We were trying to develop that so that we could get rid of livestock and stop the desertification. I was on public record because I was a fanatical young activist and researcher, and I was on public record as saying I was prepared to shoot every goddamn rancher because they were raping the land and causing the desertification of my own country. Then in the 1960s, 1965 roughly, I suddenly realized, oh my God, I'm wrong. We're all wrong. And it is not possible to reverse desertification without livestock. It cannot be done with any technology imaginable in science fiction. It cannot be done with fire, and it cannot be done by rewilding or resting the environment to recover. And those are the only three tools humans have. We can have all the creativity in the world, we can have all the labor in the world, we can have all the money in the world, and nobody listening to us can even drink water or milk unless they go to the nearest cow and suck with their mouth, or go to the nearest river and drink with their hands in the mouth. You've got to use a pipe, a pump, a cup, something. So nothing can be done with all the creativity in the world, all the labor in the world, all the money in the world, until we pick up a tool, and we're a tool using animal. So to reverse desertification, which is man-made, the desertification we're calling about, it is simply not possible. And I would debate that with any Nobel laureate, any scientist in the world, and no scientist has proved me wrong since the 1960s. So then the problem I had with that was every way humans have ever run livestock. Pastoralists, ancient cultures, their whole culture being livestock, they know far more about it than you and I will ever know. and yet they created the great deserts of the world. Then we had modern scientists, rotational grazing, all of these things, and Andre Voisin, a Frenchman, researched that over the last 200 years and found that every way that we were grazing animals led to loss of biodiversity, and that leads over two-thirds of the world, not in England or the humid climates, over two-thirds of the world's land, that leads to desertification. Right, so I had the problem then, how the hell do you do it? If every way we've ever run livestock leads to desertification, but it cannot be reversed without them, because it cannot be done with fire technology or rest in the land, how do you do it? Now, I had very few resources as an independent scientist, so what I did was to look at all uh, professions, businesses in the world, to look for some planning process, because the Frenchman, Wazan, had shown us that to solve that, you had to have a planning process to replace all grazing systems, etc., which will fail just by definition because they cannot handle the complexity. So when I looked at all the professions in the world, the only one that had come close to dealing with anything as complicated as this was the military. Now, I was an officer in the Rhodesian Army. We were fighting a civil war. Our training was the same training as Sandhurst, etc. And I just looked at the military and I said, over the last 1,000 years, how have the military academies of Europe dealt with this problem? And they had solved it. And so what I did was I simply took Sandhurst Military Academy with uh, method of planning for immediate battlefield situations, which I had received training in. And I said, oh my God, they've solved this problem. All I've got to do is take 1,000 years of their experience, and they plan for short battles, a week, a month, a day, an hour, whatever, whereas pastoralists and farmers have to plan months ahead, a year, sometimes 2 years ahead, where the animals are going to be. And I found that was simple to put out on a chart. And I developed what today is the holistic planned grazing process. Now, that process, I promise all of your viewers now, I am not aware of a single failure anywhere in the world since we developed that in the 1960s in what was then Rhodesia. I am aware of thousands of people learning to do it and dropping the planning process and going into mob grazing, adaptive management grazing, short duration grazing, cell grazing, all the grazing gurus and grass whisperers of today. None of those will reverse desertification. The planning process, based on 1,000 years of military experience, is, as far as we know, foolproof and is what we need to do. But that was heresy. So you can see why it has been resisted. Now, when I went into exile, because I was leader of a political party fighting the racist government of Rhodesia at the time, as well as my scientific work, and I was forced into exile. Now, Americans knew of my work, and when I worked from the Caribbean into America, it was a very short time before two people in the Soil Conservation Service approached me to provide training for them. And I said, I will do that on one condition, and you make it open to everyone. It must be open source, and we train all government agencies and university dealing with agriculture, the land-grant colleges. So they set up an interagency committee of all of the main government agencies in America: Bureau of Indian Affairs, Bureau of Land Management, Soil Conservation Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, etc., and the land grant colleges. And we put 2,000 academics, professionals, people with PhDs through a week of training over 2 years. And the agreement on which the American government paid me handsomely to do that was that if there was a big demand, that we would then set up an American government training center so this could go worldwide. And that was the agreement. And then I could return to my own home because I wanted to return home. I wasn't an American. Well, we ran that training for 2 years, and it was the most incredible period of learning. We had 2,000 people, bright people, brilliant people, caring people from the bureaucracies, the agencies, but they came as individuals, although sent by their institutions. Now, the demand for training became so great that I was in negotiation to train 18,000 professional people in just one American government agency, the Forest Service. And we had, in that period, we broke through, and I say we because 2,000 people helped me do that. We broke through with a second heresy. And what we discovered in that training, as we were developing the work I was involved in of trying to reverse desertification, we discovered that this was far greater issue and that the cause of the problems, global biodiversity loss, desertification, fueling climate change and feeding on each other, that the cause of it was actually the way in which all governments and environmental organizations and institutions develop policy. So that became a heresy because the belief of all institutions and all of us, including myself, our belief was there are a great many ways of developing policy, and then you develop laws and regulations that dictate what the citizens do. And everybody knows there are many ways of developing policy. There are whole schools of it, Harvard and other prestigious universities. There are libraries full of it. But if you peel the onion and get to the core where the actual policy decisions are decided, we found they're identical. It doesn't matter whether it's a dictatorship, a democracy. It doesn't matter whether it's an multidisciplinary team of scientists doing it. At the core, it's identical. Every single policy formed by any family, even a family policy, government policy is formed in exactly the same way. And it is that which is causing the problem. And I spoke about this at COP26 and suggested a solution. Now, that became a heresy because the whole world's belief is there are many ways of developing policy. The whole world's belief is that livestock and fossil fuels basically are causing global biodiversity loss, etc., leading to climate change. And so what we found was, no, it was government policies that were causing it, not livestock and not fossil fuels. Now, I mentioned at COP26 this heresy again, because we've had no disagreement in the world about desertification. The whole world knew it was caused by livestock, right? So I've dealt with that. Now, we've had disagreement about climate change. We've had scientists in denial, scientists acknowledging it, etc. But I think it's fair to say that within the last 4 or 5 years, every sane scientist has acknowledged that humans are causing climate change. Now, that acknowledgement is profound, and the media and all our institutions have missed it. You cannot have two causes of a problem. You can have many things contributing to a problem, but at the root base of it, there'll be one cause. Now, if humans are causing climate change, and science is logical, all right, then it means fossil fuels and livestock are not. They cannot cause it. What is causing it is humans and how they manage livestock, resources like fossil fuels. That is what is causing it. So we need to get beyond blaming fossil fuels, blaming carbon in the air, blaming livestock, blaming each other, to acknowledging that no, we need to focus on management, and particularly at scale, because it's management at large scale where we influence things at the global scale. So I suggested a solution to that. So yes, you're right to introduce me as a heretic, because not just from me, but from the thousands of people working with me, we have discovered two heresies.
So, Alan, let's start on the heresy that you're most famous for, and this is that we can reverse desertification and also climate change by
No, you can't reverse
bringing
climate change.
animals. Sorry, let's say desertification because I would say that desertification is a major contributor to climate change. So but what you've said instead of destocking is correctly managing livestock in these brittle environments, these semi-arid environments. If you'd like to explain that so that people can
All right.
understand.
Yeah. First, let me clear. I corrected you there.
Mm,
You will never reverse climate change. It's happening now, and it'll keep going. But what will happen, even if we stopped all fossil fuel use tomorrow entirely, climate change will continue because of global biodiversity loss, desertification, and mega fires that are fueling
mm,
climate change. And those three things have nothing to do with fossil fuels. They are entirely due to how people manage resources, how governments do.
mm,
Right. So having said that, now let's come to the desertification. When you look at those things and climate change, you cannot address it at the atmospheric level. You can't address it at that level. You have to address it at the ground, the earth level, and that means at the level of biodiversity loss and desertification, which is occurring. Biodiversity loss is occurring all over the world, and desertification over roughly 2/3 of the world's land, where the rainfall, like here, is extremely seasonal. We get all of our rain in about 4 months, and then we have about 8 months with no rain. And that's been happening for a million years. The rainfall in London and the rainfall in Johannesburg are about the same, but they're totally different climates. You can overgraze every single plant over millions of acres. You can poison plants in millions of acres. You can use bulldozers. You can use machines around London or Paris or places like that. And you cannot cause desert. You just cannot cause it. You cannot cause millions of acres to have 80, 90% of the soil between the plants to be bare. Nature just covers it up so quickly. And nature starts to grow plants even on the roofs of buildings. Now, if you come to this climate where I am, it's almost the opposite. Here, the climate is such that, and particularly where the rainfall is also low, we if we overrest land, if we overgraze land, plants on land, if we use too many chemicals, too many machines, exposed soil, whatever, all of these can create millions of hectares or acres of predominantly bare ground between the soil. So it's a very different climate, although the total rainfall is about the same. So that's the part that is desertifying in America, right across North Africa, up into China, to India, South America. It's an area far, far greater than the entire Amazon forest that we're worried about and so many people focus on. So that is our Achilles heel, and that can only be addressed at the ground level. All right, so now we come to that problem, and that I spoke about in a TED talk that's been viewed by nearly 9 million people now in 2013. But if you look at that TED talk, it still carries a disclaimer saying sometimes just dispute this. That is because I believe TED was so criticized by prominent academics in American universities for even allowing me to talk, that they still carry a disclaimer. Not a single scientist in the world has discredited the work. All the people discrediting it have no idea what the work involves. They haven't even read the textbook. It's just a knee-jerk reaction to heresy of institutions. Right, so that part of the problem can only be addressed by millions more animals. And in practical terms, that means livestock, because over vast areas of the world, we have so decimated the wildlife populations and we've so interfered with their behavior with fencing and roads and things like this, that the only tool left to us is to use livestock and the holistic planned grazing process that we've never had a failure with, or something improving on that. We didn't stick with the Wright brothers plane. Once people got the principles of flight, we could have human creativity released, and we were on the moon in 70 years. But that hasn't happened in the case of desertification because of the heresy. And I stress that only livestock can do it. Now, the reason for that you can see right behind my head. If you look right behind my head, you're looking at a thatch roof. That thatch roof was put on about 20 years ago, 25 years ago. On the inside, it's still the color of the grass the season that it died and we cut it. It's yellow. It's dead. It's not breaking down biologically. It's not oxidizing. If you go outside this building and look at the top, it is dark gray, almost black. Why? That is dead grass in sunlight. And it is chemically breaking down by oxidation. And that process can take 50 years or more for it to break down. Now, picture billions of hectares of Australia, the Americas, right up into, as I said, across North Africa and China. Picture billions of hectares of land where, particularly where the rainfall is too low to have a solid canopy of trees providing soil cover. And soil is a living organism. It has to be covered or it dies. Now, picture that, and where you've got grasses providing most of the litter, soil cover from the base of the grass, or the litter provided as a stress, particularly in low rainfall. Now, those grasses in these climates, they grow here, they grow to 6 to 15 feet high. They're over your head on a horse. Now they grow, they can't graze themselves. They've co-evolved with millions of animals over billions of years. Humans have killed off most of those animals. That grass grows, and now what happens? It dies every single year after 4 months of rain. Now, we have to get rid of it. Nature needs to get rid of it before the next rains, because the growth points are not up at the tips, like trees. The growth points are down at the ground level, out of harm's way from grazing animals, because they co-evolved with animals. Now, if the plant stands and you don't have enough animals to graze the plants and free the growth points to receive sunlight and grow again, now the plant just oxidizes like this roof. And it slowly breaks down. And that can take 20, 30, 40 years. And it kills the plant, and we blame overgrazing. And humans thought they'd solved that problem thousands of years ago, particularly Australia, where they began 50,000 years ago, roughly, to solve that problem once they'd killed off most of the large animals by using fire. But fire is rapid oxidation, and it's a chemical breakdown. And fire, you can't avoid it, exposes the soil. And exposed soil starts to die, and rainfall starts to become non-effective. And you get desertification. Now, that cannot be healed with any technology. Texas A&M University, one of the most prestigious in the range science world, developed giant machines to do the job, to get rid of that old grass and trample it down as litter, etc. The Dixon imprinter and other giant machines. Now, there was no science behind that. The only science was proof by authority. Professors in range science said these would work. So governments spent billions of dollars around the world buying those machines and using them. And today they lie rusting, and people have forgotten it, the millions of dollars, because a machine cannot dung, urinate, and digest, which the animals are doing to that plant material. And a machine pollutes and uses fossil fuel, etc. So now we're forgetting about that, and they still continue to condemn using nature's machine, which is an animal and doesn't pollute, Doesn't cause any problems, hasn't for billions of years until we mismanage them. So that, yes, is very much a heresy, and why I would defy, and I do, I not defy, I appeal to any scientist, every Nobel laureate, any scientist in the world, please to come and debate with me in a friendly way, and because it's so vital to the world, and just explain to us how you can deal with billions and billions of tons of annually dying grass above the ground surface level every year without animals. How it can be done with fire and technology. Just
Yeah.
please explain that to the world. Otherwise, let's get moving.
From my point of view, I'm probably one of the few people that have actually seen your systems on every continent. And for I've seen them in my continent, Australia, and um, throughout North America, Latin America, and actually probably the only one I haven't seen is Southeast Asia because it's not. But um, and actually, I've seen there's people doing it in Europe and other places. And what I'm always astounded on is when I walk onto these grasslands, is the incredible biodiversity compared to the neighboring farms. They stand out. You can actually see these properties before you get to them for that reason. And it, it, the things that have really impressed me is the fact that the increase in soil organic matter, so that they're much better at bringing the rain. Also, I think what people need to understand is that bare soil heats up the ground and actually drives the rain away. Um, what's happening? So, for instance, there's really good pictures in Mexico, in Chiapas, where you can see Alexander Carrillo's place, and you can see the storm on his side of the fence, and it's dry on the other side of the fence. The fact is, by regenerating um, these grasslands, bringing in all the biodiversity, we're also regenerating the local climate, bringing in more rainfall. That rainfall is infiltrating. You're seeing things like the creeks starting to flow again. The other thing we're seeing in these places is, well, these are primarily livestock farms. I think what's also impressed me is the other animals that are in the system as well. Not just livestock. So you're bringing back this incredible biodiversity into the system. So, would you like to just talk about that and your experiences in seeing that?
Yeah, and Andre, that's automatic. We anticipate that, and if it isn't happening, we investigate what's going wrong. Because if you manage holistically, which addresses the cause of global biodiversity loss, right up to policy level, if you do, it's proactive management, and if you're not getting the result you aim at, but you then we have a feedback loop and look into it. So anybody managing holistically, that's automatic. The biodiversity will start to increase, soil cover will increase, etc. And we've demonstrated that over and over. International trials, advanced projects here. Australia, you used to have an International Banksia Award. I'm very honored you gave me that award for the person doing the most for the environment on a global scale. But I see you've dropped that award since. I don't know why you don't continue it. Rachel Carson, you gave it to as well, posthumously.
Too many heretics.
So anybody can visit. We've had National Public Radio, National Geographic come here and film and show it. This property, when I bought it in the 1970s, I bought it to put my staff on, etc., because I had a bigger property west of here that I wanted to keep very wild because I'd willed it back to the nation as a national park on my death. And when I bought this property, it was desertifying very badly. The farmer, rancher on it was running 100 head of cattle. He was a very bad rancher. Maybe could have run 200. We've had over 20 years of adverse poor rainfall now, first longest run we've known of, and two of them have been the worst years ever, including this year, the driest ever known. Yeah, extremely dry. Now, when I came here at the end of the 4 months of rain, and it had been such a failure, our management staff were seriously contemplating having to destock the cattle management, habitat management herd, managing habitat for wildlife and humans. We all need habitat, reversing desertification. They wanted to decrease that herd because of this worst drought ever. And I said, no, no, don't make that decision the usual way. Make it holistically. Look at our holistic context, which guides action, which ties humans to a life-supporting environment, and do the holistic plan grazing, and that will indicate whether you need to destock or not. Well, they did the planning, and that indicated, no, you don't need to destock. Well, now we're getting towards the end of the 8 months of no rain. We've got 2 months to go. I've been going right around the property. I've been going around it the last 2 days with the people filming for the new one in the 3-part series of films, which was done
Kiss the
on
ground people.
organic agriculture, etc.
Yeah, the
And
Kiss the ground people are
we,
filming you.
yeah, we are running 400% more livestock than the original person owning this land ran. And now we have no option but to find the money somehow to buy another 1,000 head of cattle purely as a tool to try to keep pace with the production of the land. If we don't, this land will begin to regress. The only thing in the world that can reverse desertification is thousands, millions more animals and this planning process. And we're experiencing that. And anybody in the world is welcome to come and look. Now, we have great difficulty in getting anybody from an environmental organization, a ranching organization, an agricultural department to ever come and visit.
Yeah, I'm
So
a
there's been
great.
plenty of evidence. There's been plenty of evidence for this for years. It's automatic. What I'd like to talk about, Andre, as we're having this discussion, is to get beyond blaming, because as I stressed earlier, nobody is to blame for this. Most people are good. Most people are doing their best. So why is it happening? It's happening because of our institutional reaction to heresies. So what I have done is suggested a way through this. We need to unite, stop blaming, and deal with the cause of the problem. Now, when we take the regenerative agricultural movement, which, as far as I know, began from Bob Rodale and myself, now it's getting out of hand, and people are talking of regenerative everything, and it's being greenwashed, etc. And I think you said you've got something like 500 organizations, and that you're probably the biggest regenerative agricultural movement in the world, and the one I most admire in many ways. Now, when I was in Hungary recently, we were talking about this problem, and I said, look, as I hear you all talking, you're ridiculing the agriculture in the Soviet occupation period, because bureaucrats in Moscow were forming the policy, and that was being forced on you as farmers, and you were all ridiculing it as stupid. And I said, no, you're not under the Soviet occupation. All right, you're now part of the European Union. I said, I'm with you on the land, and what are you doing? You are ridiculing the agricultural policies you're obliged to follow because of bureaucrats in Brussels. I see this as two sides of the same coin. How can you be following stupid policies that you know are going to damage the land, you know are going to damage your economy, you know are going to damage your community, and you're doing it, you said, because bureaucrats in communist Soviet period were dictating the policies. Now you've got democratic bureaucrats in Brussels, and you're doing the same things. So what's the difference? We need to stop the blaming and acknowledge where it's coming. It's coming from policy development. Now, I think when we look at those of us, including myself, that so support this regenerative agricultural movement, let's first say why it's so important. It's so important because without agriculture, you cannot have a church, you cannot have a choir, you cannot have a university, cannot have a political party. We couldn't have this discussion. You cannot have any business in the world. You cannot have a city. Agriculture is the basis of civilization. Now, currently, agriculture is not crop production. Agriculture is the production of food and natural fiber from the world's land and waters. Currently, our whole earth is virtually engaged in agriculture, fisheries, forestry, wildlife, crop farming, it's all agriculture. Now, when we look at the whole of our earth, all right, 6% of it is cropland. And most of the focus of the regenerative agriculture movement is on 6% of agriculture. We need to expand it. Now, 94% we're ignoring. The whole of our planet is losing biodiversity. Oceans are because of our policies, our practices, our resource management, right? If we look at the land alone in the planet, if we look at just the land and ignore the agriculture in the oceans, then we find that the croplands are roughly 20% of the land in America and the world average. And we're ignoring 80% of the land, which of that land area of the world, roughly 2/3 is desertifying. All right, so we need to expand our horizon to realizing this is a global problem. We're all in this boat together, and it's sinking, and it is entirely dependent on agriculture. Now, when we look at those of us in the regenerative agriculture movement, you mentioned 500 organizations. And so those organizations, and in Hungary, when I talked to them, it turned out they said there were at least 100 in Europe, and I know there are many in America. So we've got 200 or 300 agricultural organizations pleading for production through the biological sciences by farmers of food in that way. Now, they are competing for funds, they're vying for validity of their own thing, and it is chaotic. Now, I think we need organizations like yours to be a place where we can all, let's get together and have a focused voice from all of us on this, because we're not making any progress against mainstream agriculture, which is corporate-based, and it's based on chemistry and marketing of technology. It's not based on the biological sciences. But you guys, us in regenerative agriculture, I can assure you we're not even at the policy table.
Yeah.
When governments and European Union form policy, we're not even at the table. And so unless we start to get a unified voice, you're never going to be. And so we're doomed. Now, when I spoke at COP26, I suggested a way forward because world leaders don't know what to do. Action is being demanded from them, but from every conference on climate change or desertification, nothing emerges except chaos and divided opinions, because nobody is addressing the cause of the problem. And in the COP meeting, I talked about that and I said, all right, the cause is management. Now, if you're going to help world leaders, how the hell does that help them? You can't just tell them it's management. So what do we manage? Management, what are we managing? Now, here we come to the heresy. The world believes, and you and I believed this in the past, that we manage millions of things every day on our farms, in our businesses. We are managing millions of things. No, in 1983, when I was commissioned to train those 2,000 scientists in the work I was developing, all right, we discovered we don't. We produce millions of things. We produce milk, beans, corn, beef, whatever, wine. We produce cell phones, bombs, smartphones, music, art, literature, buildings, bombs, space exploration vehicles. We produce millions of things that make civilization possible. We do not manage those things, we produce them. If we produce them, we can produce food or bombs. We can produce jails or schools. We can produce them independent of each other. If the whole economy collapses or anything, we'll still keep producing things. Now, so those we're producing, we're not managing. They're not self-organizing. If we stop producing, they stop. If you stop producing food, it stops. You stop producing motor cars, they stop. If the batteries run out, many of these things stop. If the energy source runs out, they stop. So then what the hell are we managing? And all humans are only managing three things. And that's what we discovered in 1983. What we are managing is ourselves, our families, our communities, our farms, our small businesses. That's the human scale of management. Right now, when we go to the bigger scale, managing at scale, we can only do it through organizations and institutions. And we have to have them. They're our most efficient way of managing at scale. Now, the average human today, including me, can't even make a toothbrush. Why? Because it's made by a corporation. Almost everything, the shirt I'm wearing, I can't make it. It's made by a corporation, a company, an organization. So that's where the scale of it is happening. Now, what are organizations, what are we managing that is causing the problem? Well, it is that when we develop policy, all right, the government developing the policy has to realize that the policy is how do they manage the institutions that have to finance themselves, manage the economy, and manage nature to produce everything that humans need. Now, when we look at the three things we manage, institutions, economy, and nature to produce everything we need, which comes from nature and goes back to nature, when we look at those three, we cannot manage them independent of one another. You and I can't even manage our family because if we can't finance it, we go broke and we commit suicide or whatever. And so it's the same with every company, every organization. Its first task is to grow and finance itself. Then we manage nature to produce everything. Now, there's not a single business that'll ever be sustainable, not a single economy that'll ever be sustainable until agriculture is truly regenerative. So what we need is to just help governments develop policy using all the available knowledge we have, because it's not a lack of scientific knowledge, it's a management problem, help governments somewhere to just develop policy holistically. The Savory Institute can provide the facilitation, because we've been doing this training and policy development stuff for decades, and we can provide the facilitation, and any country can just develop policy in that way, and it becomes totally different. The world can observe it. And that's what I suggested. This could happen in Australia, could happen in Zimbabwe, where I am at the moment, could happen anywhere, or we could take an issue like national parks. Here, there are 30 national parks around where I live, and they are our worst examples of biodiversity loss, desertification, fueling climate change. Now, that's not the aim of a national park. Why is that happening in all our national parks around here and in New Mexico, where I lived for about 40 years? The national parks, there were terrible examples of desertification contributing to climate change. These are seasonal and rainfall environments. Now, when we look at those national parks, what do people blame? Yeah, they blame too many elephants. Back to blaming animals, too many animals. in America, where they haven't got any elephants, they say it's natural. No, it's not natural. All right. So we could pick national parks because there is nothing left to blame. You cannot attribute this loss of biodiversity and desertification and climate change to poaching, because poaching doesn't cause habitat destruction, cannot contribute it to attribute it to hunting, to too many animals, to colonialism, to slavery, to corruption, to greed, to politics. You can't attribute it to anything except management by professional people in the world's environmental organization and government. That is the sole cause. Now, if we could take national parks in Botswana, Zimbabwe, because that's a neutral issue. Everybody in the world wants national parks to be preserving biodiversity and not losing it. We could take that as an example, have it internationally observed, have the government here say, just develop a policy holistically in the interests of the citizens and not in the interests of institutions. And you would get a totally different result. Why do I know that? Because we've done it over and over and over again. In the army, we had something called toots. You can't experiment at fighting a battle. You can plan all you like. You can't experiment. So what would we do? We would do toots, tactical exercises without troops, where you simulate it as closely as you can to see what's likely to be the outcome. We've done that for now nearly 40 years, over and over. And we've simulated, let's develop the policy in national parks or agriculture. I've done it with groups of lawmakers. I've done it in India, in Lesotho, in America, done it over and over again. And when we develop policy holistically in the interests of citizens and not in the interests of institutions, political parties, environmental organizations, farmers' organizations, etc., we get a totally different result. Now, the reason we get a different result is because institutions are not human. Institutions are incapable of common sense, incapable of empathy, love, caring, any of these human characteristics. And for anybody disbelieving me, let me just take the example of religion. And I'll just take one religion because many people listening will be Christians. All right, we could have looked at any religion because they're all the same essentially, but we'll just look at one. And the message of the founder was terribly simple, basically love and caring for each other. Now, over the last 2,000 years, millions and millions and millions of Christians in every country have been capable of doing that. Now, what happened when we took religion to scale? We formed well over 2,000 Christian churches, branches of Christianity. For centuries, they've been fighting each other, killing each other, going to war, protecting pedophile priests, not protecting innocent children, etc. And nobody is being bad. It is how institutions are. And we know that from research and from history. It's what's called a wicked problem, meaning almost impossible to solve. Now, when we look at the things we manage, economies, institutions, and nature, they have emergent properties, as it's called, things that happen that you didn't expect, and they also have what are called wicked problems. In nature, there are very, very few. There are almost none. One I could almost call it was desertification. For over 10,000 years, desertification destroyed many civilizations. It destroyed civilizations all along the Nile, except for the mouth of the Nile, where the destruction of Ethiopia provided the silt every year to keep civilization going for 10,000 years. So we've had this failure, and I lost my train of thought there for a moment. I'm sorry. That's a senile moment. I'm going to be 89 this month. Maybe it'll come back to me.
I was going to say, Alan, for 89, absolutely brilliant. And I wouldn't call it senile. I'll say what happens as we get older, we actually have got so much in there that it takes us a while to work out where to retrieve it. It's all there. But what I
One thing
think,
I must say,
sorry,
all my life I've been obsessed with trying to find the solution to this problem
yeah,
since I was 20. In fact, when I realized biodiversity loss in national parks was not understood by the top ecologists in the world, and that's when I began to focus on it. But now, at my age, when I'm in the departure lounge, in effect, I'm actually more worried about the future of humanity than I've ever been, because we're just seeing increasing chaos, chaos, chaos because of unsound policies. And when I mentioned to you training the 2,000 people in
mhm,
America, we reached the point where in the training, each group of professional people, roughly 30 at a time over a week, going through the development of the holistic management framework, we reached the point where they brought hundreds of their own policies from all over America to the training and analyzed their own policies, as we now had the power to do with this framework. And one of the groups concluded, they had a long discussion, and they came to a conclusion that we documented. And I published it in first edition of my textbook, and I can quote it to you exactly now. They said, we now recognize that unsound resource management is universal in the United States. That's a terribly profound statement. Frankly, it's universal in the world.
yeah,
And when your government's developing policies are almost universally unsound, there should be no surprise in climate change, desertification continuing, agriculture being the biggest contributor to climate change, even more so than fossil fuels.
yeah,
And even if we stop fossil fuels tomorrow, as I said earlier, climate change will continue. So there's no mystery to that when all of that is dominated by agricultural policies and resource management policies of governments. So we need to come together and address that cause
yeah.
of the problem.
Alan, I fully agree with you. And I think one of the things I think is really important here is that, you know, most people will look at all these issues and they are overwhelmed by it and people turn off from it. But from my point of view, looking at your life's work, is that you have shown how we can turn it around at scale. This is for me, the really positive message. And I'd actually like to end this um, interview or this discussion that we're having on this positive message, because the fact is, you know, you have been doing successfully over tens of millions of acres on every continent. This is really impressive. And for people to understand that with holistic playing or holistic management as a big tool and holistic planned grazing as an on the ground tool, that we can turn this around. And it is, you know, I think the other thing, what I like is that you managed to conceptualize it so people can do it and at family levels, you know, that you've given people the planning tool and empowered them to make a difference. And, you know, so would you just like to talk about that, the whole um, training people in how to plan and how it empowers them and the difference that that makes?
Well, yes, Andre, thank you. First, I'd like to stress I didn't do it. Okay, I've written my memoir, which I'm hoping will be out at the end of the year, and I describe how the ability to manage holistically developed from a unique set of circumstances here of dying empire, dying colonialism, small population, a person forced to work as an ecologist on the scientific aspect of my work, forced to fight 20 years of a war as an officer in the army, a person who became leader of a political party to try to, believing I could bring about change if we could get an ecologist into Parliament and then ending up in exile and then being commissioned by the American government to train 2,000 people. So I don't take the credit. What I am advocating could never have ever been developed by one person, could never have been developed by any institution or university in the world. It arose from a unique set of circumstances, including exile, providing that opportunity of 2 years of working with 2,000 very caring bureaucrats where we broke through. So the credit does not come to me. I was purely the focal point, the one person who would not give up. I just said, I will die rather than solve this problem. I am fed up with hearing blaming and complaining and whining, which I was hearing around campfires, conferences, everything. So this was developed by many people. And yes, if we could get the Royal Society, the US National Academy of Sciences, any of these people to do just one thing, just talk to me. They boycott me. Even environmental organizations won't even talk to me. It was arranged for me to give a talk at Godalming in the headquarters of the World Wildlife Fund 40 years ago. I traveled to London to do it, went out there with Ivan Hatting, who arranged it. Dr. Hatting was there. I met great people. I was introduced all around, went to the room to give the talk on what we're talking about, and they boycotted it. Not one person attended except Ivan. So this is the problem. If you and thousands of people could just sign a petition asking Sir Adrian Smith, the president of the Royal Society, to just talk to me. I can't get them to do that. I'm just brushed off as a heretic and a crank. So
Well,
so once we do that, the solution, please believe me, because we've done it over and over, is easier than the management we're doing at the moment. And the main thing is it's harmonious, because the first thing you do is to stop the controversy and the fighting, because every human is wanting the same thing at the end of the day: more security, better food, cleaner water. So we start from a point of agreement, and we don't even discuss the problems until we have total agreement on how people want their lives to be in that culture, tie that to the life-supporting environment in a condition 200 years from now that'll be sustaining their descendants like that, and to their economy and their behavior. And this is what we call a holistic context, because at the moment that's not done by any government. Now, when we do that, now we open our minds to all science, beyond just beliefs, to all science and to indigenous knowledge, open our minds across disciplines, and have the exact same people develop the policy, and you get a totally different result with complete harmony. So let us just do that with an issue like national parks. Let's have it under sponsorship or organized by the National Academy of Sciences in the US or Royal Society or one of them, and have it internationally observed. Now, if what I'm talking about, and we do that, the cost will be $1 or $2 million. If I'm totally wrong, and it produces chaos like every conference in the world does, instead of a way forward for world leaders, the downside would be we'd waste a year and we'd waste a couple of $1 million. That's a downside. If I'm right, and there's a 98% chance that I'll be right, all right? If I'm right, what is the value of that? We will save billions of lives. We will save every business in the world that cannot be sustainable until agriculture is. And the answer will come from the people. I will provide no input. The Savory Institute, which is younger people taking over from me, will provide no input, basically, except some ecological principles beyond beliefs and the facilitation. If you took Australia, your Prime Minister could do this tomorrow. If your Prime Minister spoke to me tomorrow, I could explain to him and his cabinet how this process works, And Australia could do this because your Australian policies are no sounder than any country.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
why not get 1,000 people in Australia to sign a petition to your Prime Minister and only ask for one thing, that he and his senior advisors just talk to me. That's all.
Alan, yeah, look, I fully agree with you. I think we're in a position, the way we've set up Regeneration International, that we can and will work with you because this is a very important issue. And at the moment, there are some very, very good, say, politicians and ministers and bureaucrats that um, we are connected with, where I think we can open that door because that's the critical. Getting the foot through, getting through the door, is the hard thing. Once once we're through, the messages are so sound, then we can have an impact. So, look, I'm just mindful of the time now that we've been talking for an hour, and I just want to say, Alan, what you've done is, to me, is very inspiring, and I would, believe that we can work together. There's a lot of us now. That's what we've done by putting the network together, and I believe that we can change things. And what we've all been wanting for all our lives is to make a better world, and we will get that better world because people like us, like you say, we're too, what's the word, pig-headed to give up. We've been fighting all our
Yeah,
lives, and we'll continue to fight for it.
I believe that, Andre, and thank you. And bear in mind, none of the politicians, the bureaucrats are being stupid or evil. It's how institutions behave. They're good people and they need help. And we can give
Exactly.
world leaders help and all people hope. We can do this, and we can do it simply if we can just get one prime minister or president to talk to me.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more, and we will do that, Alan. So I just want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate what you have been doing, and I just want to say the best is yet to come. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Alan.
Andre. As I said, I appreciate what you're doing too. You
Thank you.
have one of the best organizations I know of and collaborations with so many people. Wonderful.
So do you. So do you, Alan.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so
Okay.
much. Ciao.